for our panel on bi-plus masculinities that we called I'm Not As Gay as Other Queer People, Bi-plus Men Perception of Masculinity and Sexual Identity. I'm very proud to present Jason Preston and James Ravenhill and Richard O De Visser. In particular, Dr. Jason Preston is a lecturer in psychology at the University of Brighton. His research interests focus on contemporary masculinities, men's relationship with care and care receiving, and the barriers which can prevent access to adequate care. And Dr. Ravenhill is a lecturer at the Department of Psychology at Royal Holloway at the University of London, and they work on gay men's masculinity and sexual practices, but also mental health care settings. And Professor Richard O De Visser is a professor of psychology at the Brighton and Sussex Medical School, working on health psychology, sexualities, and gender. And they're going to talk with, oh, sorry, that wasn't the name of their presentation. I'm not as gay as other queer people. Then we're going to have Vincenzo Cicala, an Italian PhD candidate at La Sapienza, University of Rome. And they're going to talk about their studies and PhD study. And so on. And finally, Coritas is going to talk with us about behind closed doors pro jobs and the Indian world of heteroflexible and bi-plus design. So I guess we go in following our turn. And then I welcome Dr. Preston, James Ravenhill, and Richard O De Visser, and to talk with our presentation, I'm Not As Gay as Other Queer People, Bi-plus Men Perception of Masculinity and Sexual Identity. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just going to get my slides up. Right, can we all see this okay?
Yeah, we can see it pretty clear.
Perfect. Right, yeah. So, yeah, I'm Dr. Jason Preston, he, him, from the University of Brighton. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about our research involving bi-plus men's perceptions of masculinity and sexual identity. So just a couple of acknowledgements before we get started. Just firstly saying thank you to the participants who shared their experiences so openly and willingly for this study. The study itself was funded by the University of Brighton, their Diversity and Inclusion Fund, and there's a couple of headshots of my colleagues, Dr. James Ravenhill and Professor Richard De Visser, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but have said, yeah, I've got the capable hands for talking about this research. Yeah, so just some content advisory before we get started. The presentation contains study participants' accounts of their sexual experiences, but there's no graphic descriptions, there's no sexual images or references, references to sexual coercion or violence, but there is some profanity, so some swearing within the quotes that I've used. Just a note on the language as well. We're using bi-plus rather than bisexual in the spirit of avoiding the reproduction of binaries. But binaries do kind of form a large chunk of the discussion and the way in which these are navigated. Also, just to note that the participants themselves were responding to adverts for bisexual men, and we use straight rather than heterosexual when referring to people. This is to distinguish between sexual identities and practices. So just to give a brief kind of framing to the study, we basically take a social constructionist approach to gender. So in this sense, there's no essential core to masculinity in this sense. We see it as something that is a result of socialization and performativity, as Butler would argue. And that means that masculinity or masculinities is kind of pluralized and varies between men and within men, and is highly context dependent, as we'll explore. But again, masculinity as a cultural framing is often associated with very specific attributes, so things like independence, resilience, emotional constraint, and that the absence of these is something that is seen as either non-masculine or feminine. We also draw upon Connell's work on hegemonic masculinity, So this is where it's kind of describing the social cultural privileges that are afforded to some men, and very specific masculine attributes and practices. This idea that there is a hierarchy of different traits depending on kind of the local, national, or global kind of contexts. So it's not necessarily a definite a constellation of specific attributes, but there are common ideas around hegemonic masculinity that have kind of endured over time. So things like financial dominance, physical strength, emotional constraint, competitiveness, and in the use of misogyny and homophobia. But I think also very significantly is this idea of having a successful, ostentatious heterosexuality as being very key to those kind of cultural constructions of masculinity. And these, or the presence of these and the performance of these can afford some social power or a form of masculine capital in that sense. So we're kind of exploring how that masculine capital kind of plays out. So I kind of alluded to, for straight men in particular, there are kind of key elements of masculine capital based around this idea of heterosexuality, sporting prowess, alcohol consumption. Like these are the key signs of masculine capital for straight men. And heterosexuality contributes more to overall masculine capital than any other attribute. However, my colleagues, Dr. Ravenhill and Professor De Visser, have also explored the role of masculine capital for gay men. So looking at how things like voice quality, physique, so like their muscularity, and sexual positioning in anal intercourse, so either a top position or bottom position, could be sources of masculine capital for gay men. So you can see in the graph how these different identity characteristics were scored higher or lower on a masculinity kind of rating scale. So being identifying as a top, being muscular, having like a deep voice, were perceived as being more masculine for gay men than having a bottom identity, being thin or having a high pitched voice. So this leads us to the question of what about bi plus men? So in what ways are sexual practices potential sources for masculine capital for gay men? But also, what does it mean for bi men? So what we did is conducted a phenomenological interview study, what a word to have to say on a Sunday afternoon, with 22 cisgender bi plus men recruited in the UK, and we used social media and paid for adverts on Grindr. And out of our analysis, we've had kind of two concurrent sort of papers. So on the one hand, we've looked at how bi plus men's beliefs around masculinity in sex shape their sexual practices in sex with women and men, looking at kind of sexual practices more specifically, but then also how bi plus men reconcile their identities across different spaces, so particularly heteronormative or queer spaces, thinking about the role of sexual identity, which is the focus of the presentation today. So one of the key themes to come out from we interpreted in the data was this idea of dualities and multiplicities. While we, as I said earlier, about kind of these sort of binaries kind of permeating through perceptions of masculine and sexual identity. So we have Russell, who talks about these different sides to his personality. So on the one hand, being a strong male, playing sports to a high level, but there's another side of him that wants to be penetrated by a male, what he describes as a very strong masculine side versus more of a passive side. And describing these as two conflicting things, being quite masculine on the one hand, but then sometimes quite camp, as he says. I'm a man's man, but yes, I'm very gay as well. That these terms are being used almost as kind of adverbs, in a sense, to describe these different sides of personality. So straight and gay are utilized to describe those different sides, the dualities in that sense. The participants also talked about the masculine demands of particularly sort of heterosexual or heteronormative spaces. So Francis, for example, again, kind of drawing on a sporting context, talks about that kind of locker room culture, locker room chat. And how that's typically kind of very heteronormative, talking about girls, and how he has to try and, to fit in, make an overly masculine comment, even if he doesn't believe in it specifically himself. Hank spoke about a similar kind of aspect, but more from a workplace perspective. So, being a senior manager, there was this, as he said, an implied sense that his leadership and masculinity go together. And that masculine performance has been something that he's sort of struggled with. It's something that doesn't seem to feel quite natural to him, creating a sense of dissonance in his personality. And this again was kind of a common theme across the participants' discussions, how this kind of instability between these two kind of separate worlds that they describe, so the hetero and queer context in this sense, and Alfie talked about this in some depth, particularly how he is appearing to be different in different spaces. So around heterosexuals, he's perceived to be gay, to be more feminine. So things like crossing his legs, people would think that that's something that a woman would do, which would make him feel very self-conscious. However, then when navigating kind of queer or gay contexts, he was told that he was very masculine, having a very manly beard, having a hairy chest makes him manly. So there was this kind of, like I say, instability between the two different contexts in this sense. So what he described this as is almost kind of a liminal space, this feeling of being betwixt and between these two worlds, what he describes, or we describe as being kind of too straight to be gay, but then too gay to be straight, and not feeling like he fit into these two groups. I think what's important to note here is that when sort of interacting with romantic or sexual partners across these two different contexts, he's not sort of romantically dating another bi plus person, but someone that is either identifying as like a straight woman or a gay man. So that kind of helped to, or not helped, but kind of structured those two separate worlds in that way. And this created this sense of being betwixt and between, sort of a liminal space for a lot of the participants, where we can see kind of a lot of these mononormative, or an internalization of mononormative ideals. So for Ivo, for example, this sense of embarrassment, as he describes it, not being entirely straight or even entirely gay. For Simon, it was a case of feeling on the fringes of an LGBT community, and that sort of feeling of not being fully integrated due to this kind of sense of liminality. And again, there were also then feelings of inauthenticity. Ivo, for example, saying that because he is bisexual and not gay, it means he doesn't feel like a real queer person, and that feeling of shame that comes with that, but not feeling a sense of confidence in his sexuality. And again, you can kind of see the kind of mononormative ideals kind of permeating through these kind of ideas. Connor spoke about something very similar as well when talking about the end of a relationship, a same-sex relationship he had with a person, and they resented a lot of what was described as his heteronormative characteristics. So a lot of the similar kind of discussion to this idea of straight passing and feeling like, you're not quite fully integrated, that you are, as he says, a little bit of an imposter in some of those queer settings. In some cases, then, there's a sense of how the participants were then reconciling their heteromasculine and bisexual identities. So Pete, for example, spoke about within sexual practices, just that feeling of engaging in sex with a man was this, enjoying that he could feel a sense of feminine. Being in a kind of bottom role, in a more submissive kind of position, he enjoyed that kind of feeling, and it helped him come to sort of an acceptance with himself that that's who he is. And even though others might not necessarily perceive that to be masculine. So just in terms of some take-home messages, then there are, like all men, bi plus men experience this kind of tension or conflict in responding to sort of the dominant heteronormative discourses of gender. Very similar to gay men, bi plus men have to find ways, so either through discursive or behavioral ways, of reconciling these different, their masculine and sexual identities, whether that's being sexual with other people or not. But unlike other men, bi plus men then also experience these feelings of inauthenticity and isolation due to this idea of hegemonic monosexuality, the monosexual norms that again kind of permeate through gay and heteronormative contexts. And that can create a sense of liminality, a state of feeling betwixt and between, of not fully feeling authentic in that sense. And yeah, future research can investigate further this kind of difference between the behavioral and psychosocial implications of these experiences. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Jason.
Yeah, how much time
we'll leave some space for questions, but now we have to rush up a bit. And thanks again for this interesting topic and research. And then we just have to try to stay in time so we can leave some space for questions and debate. Next is Dr. Vincenzo Cicala, PhD candidate at University La Sapienza of Rome, focusing on gender studies, queer studies, and internet, working on bi plus identities and masculinities. Vincenzo, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes, I apologize in advance because I have connection issues and I have a party upstairs. So I'm sorry if you will hear some noises that were not foreseen. So just a sec. I'm sharing my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, at least for me. I don't know for others.
All right.
Yeah, on my end, it's still just black saying that you've started.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we see it now. Sorry.
They start and
Okay, because Zoom creates me a lot of issues. So let's try again.
It was working actually, so we were seeing it.
Can you see now?
Give it a bit of time.
Okay.
Okay, now it works. If you make it full screen, that would be better. So like F5.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Aurelio, for introducing me. My name is Vincenzo Cicala. I'm a PhD candidate in Communication, Social Research, and Marketing at Sapienza University in Rome. And today I am presenting the preliminary findings of research I am conducting, supervised by Professor Francesca Comunello, with the title, Challenging Bi Invisibility, a Scoping Literature Review on Digital Narratives of Male Bisexuality. So a quick introduction on digital environments that now have become a place where people, and obviously even LGBTQI plus people, exist, negotiate their identity, and express themselves. And sometimes digital environments are, especially for LGBTQI plus people, queer people, are places where they can express their identity even more, considering some social cultural context and political situations in specific countries. So the current studies on digital representation of male bisexuality when it comes to bisexual men, most of the studies, they focus on their digital sexual agency, their digital erotic affordances, and their constraints. But the literature actually lacks on analyzing the various, the different, and the nuanced ways in which bisexual identity can be expressed. So the research question at the basis of this study is, how do bisexual men represent themselves on digital environments, especially when they engage with non-sexual contents? So the theoretical framework we're building this study from is pretty heterogeneous. We have men's studies, of course, queer studies, and internet studies. And when it comes to queer studies, I would like to focus more on what we can call nowadays bisexual research, and mostly on the concept introduced by Professor Nora Madison that is inscribing bisexuality. What is inscribing bisexuality? It is a process where bisexual individuals, they try to create a visibility for their identity, both online and offline. So what is the research aim of this project? The main objective is to map the literature and analyze the main topics on the representation of male bisexuality online. But this review actually represents the groundwork for a broader research project. We would like to understand if the digital agency of this social identity, and here for digital agency we also intend representation or self-representation, if this engagement with non-sexual context might create a sense of belonging, or it might intensify a sense of solitude. So the methodology used is pretty simple, actually. We created two queries, one on bisexuality, the representation of male bisexuality online, and one on representation of masculinity online. We put both on Scopus and Web of Science, then we removed the duplicates, we selected and classified documents with high, medium, and low relevance, and we are now conducting a thematic analysis of the selected documents with a critical approach. So here you can see this is the first query about bisexuality. We try to be very open, very inclusive with Boolean indicators like or, bisexuality or bisexual, men or masculinity, digital online, and so on. And we actually did the same, we created the same query for masculinity. So this is the one that was used to research on masculinity. So you can see from this graphic that there is a discrepancy between the first query and the second query. Still, I consider that there were not much documents on digital representation of masculinity, but I can say that we selected a lot of the documents a lot of the documents we selected were also selected with classified with high relevance. The main topic that is it's actually the first result, but I would like to consider the main topic is that most of the literature on bisexual men identity is medical anatomical focused. So this is, in my opinion, a call for broader sociocultural and social communicative research, since we do not have much documents on it. The main topics were online pornographic representation. Literature actually focused mostly on the online representation of pornographic representation of bisexual men on digital environments such as X or even OnlyFans, and even literature tried to empathize how this representation actually reinforced the heterosexual and the homosexual binarism. We then had found the theme, the topic of dating apps. Literature focused on the self-representation of bisexual men on dating apps, but still mostly related to a sexual representation or for some sort of basically bisexual men looking for sex. There was also a document that we found very interesting, where bisexual men actually they negotiate safe sex online as a digital agency. And also we found a very interesting document about the circumstance of prostitution of bisexual men on dating apps that represent themselves with hegemonic masculinity traits. Another interesting topic we found is that is the sexual transmitted disease-related stigmatization. During the monkeypox epidemic in 2022, there was a study, actually a couple of studies on the online discourse of bisexual men, and literature showed how, once again, bisexual were considered online the ones that were still spreading the disease, basically. And this actually led to new forms of stigma and discrimination. We found a very interesting topic, actually, in the study by Bury and Easton, that they actually postulated pornographic self-representation on social media both reinforces and challenges the heterosexual, homosexual binary, especially in case involving bisexual men. They studied a specific digital environments, in this case, Reddit, and they observed a specific phenomenon they call dick gazing. What is dick gazing? Men in general that they share their dick pics on a specific part of Reddit, but they say that the ones that that share their penis perform a straight identity. Meanwhile, the majority of those who comment these pics perform a gay identity. So, however, this reinforces the heterosexual and homosexual binary, even if it comes when, for example, with bi-curious performances of, for example, straight men that are curious towards some bisexual practices. However, the resulting space, they call it a fraternity of cock that remains fundamentally heterocentric in its focus and function. So, of course, when it comes to digital representation of bisexual men, we cannot refer to some gender issues. Of course, we found the topic of performative masculinity. Most of bisexual men, they are associated with physical strength, sexual powers, and emotional detachment. Again, the body objectification, because of course, when it comes to their sexual contents, or when it comes to their pornographic representation, bisexual men are objectified and they are often reduced to aesthetic or erotic values. There was a very interesting study we found by Luger in 2023 that talks about an idealized image of masculinity, where this performative masculinity and body objectification comes from. He postulated that this idealized image of masculinity has its roots in fascist and extremist discourses where male identity is framed to authoritarian, exclusionary, and hyper-nationalistic ideologies. So we are moving towards a more comprehensive research. We need more theoretical exploration. We need a broader social, cultural, and social communicative research on bisexuality in general, but obviously on bisexual men. And we need to analyze all the phenomenon or phenomena and the agency of bisexual men with intersectional lens. And of course, we need more attention on digital representation of bisexual men and their agency with non-sexual contents. What's next? Of course, we are incorporating all the results, especially with the ones that comes from the second period, the one from that was researching on digital representation of masculinity. Why? Because we need, as I was saying, like right now, that we need to study bisexual men with intersectional lens. And we also should try to reduce male by erasure that has, since it is needed to be studied through intersectional lens, it's a broader gender issue. So the time was very, very.
Thank you, Vincenzo. It's okay.
Thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. I will check the chat now, or if you want to engage on LinkedIn or on, you would like to send an email or give me a feedback on my work, it will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vincenzo. Of course, just we'll keep posted, and if anybody has any question, write in the chat. Write briefly, so we try to stay in time. I do welcome Corey Tats. Him is a PhD candidate in gender studies at Indiana University, Bloomington. His research interests include masculinities, bi-plus sexuality studies, hookup culture, and with a presentation called Behind Closed Doors, Brojobs, and the Hidden World of Heteroflexible and bi-plus desire. So there's a kind of connection between teams, and I hope we can manage. So thank you, Corey. You can feel free to share your slides and tell us more about Brojobs, because not everybody knows. You are muted right now.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my slide. Just give me 1 second.
Sure, no worries.
Yes. Mm. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so hi, my name is, oh, let me put my video on. Hi, my name is Corey Tats. I am, like I said, a PhD candidate in gender studies at IU Bloomington. And yeah, today I'm going to be talking about bro jobs, which was part of my master's thesis, so it's a couple years old, but hey, why not share some more? So, okay, what is a bro job? So a bro job is basically oral sex between two men, and I define it as at least when one of the participants does not identify as gay. And so within this, I'm really looking at straight men, heteroflexible, and also bisexual men. So I will use the term like MSM because not everyone identifies as bi plus within this work. And there's an acceptance of a more fluid concept of sexuality is growing within the American South. Sexual exploration among bi-curious men is getting popular. Men are still expected to uphold a hetero persona, especially within bro culture, which I still study quite a lot. Examples of bro culture could be social fraternities and sport teams. These men often want to reclaim their social roles as men, oftentimes in bodybuilding or weight management. These activities are usually done in groups or with other bros. So typically, bro culture participants want to be seen as one of the boys, and they're often accustomed to being at the top of the heteropatriarchy. Even within these hegemonic masculine locales, it's possible for experimentation to take place. One sexual behaviors and practices do not specifically have to align with labels or specific orientations. And according to feminist scholar and sociologist Jane Ward, who Jane Ward and Tony Silva are very big from my work, she says that some men who have sex with men, MSM, prefer to do so within gay and queer cultural worlds. Others indicate a greater sense of belonging or cultural fit within heterosexual identity and heteroerotic culture. And she also talks a lot about like dude sex, and dude sex is really all about like guys pretty much having NSA, no strings attached sex, and basically being really more so physical, like getting the needs maybe you can't get from a wife or a girlfriend, etc. So yeah, so this research here, what I was really asking, what are the roles of bro jobs in online hookup culture among discrete and down low men in the American South? Why are these men seeking a bro job? Is a bro job merely self-contained sexual act, or is it in part defines one's sexual identity? What does a bro job offer that a heterosexual encounter cannot? So I had to do this, and also to be clear, people will say bro job, but I wouldn't say it's that common. Like for example, dude sex isn't something that you would not see on. It's a purely academic term. So I've seen bro job on like Grinder or like Sniffies or whatnot. I wouldn't say it's that common though. So, okay. And I think it is a part of like adhering to these hegemonic masculine norms for sure. So yeah, This was in 2021 and 2022. This case study started with 40 MSM on Qualtrics, and then if they were interested, I interviewed them. Most of the interviews did take place on Reddit. I think one was on Zoom, and this, like I said, it was specifically in the Southeast. But there was a focus on Metro Atlanta, and if you're wondering like why Metro Atlanta, it's because I'm originally from Metro Atlanta. So I was really interested in that political landscape, and I was also really looking at like the DL and how like that term was appropriated as well. Because now we have like different people from different races saying it. But yeah, I started on Grindr, didn't really work out, so I moved to Reddit for most of the recruiting. And yeah, these are like the pseudonyms of everyone who I interviewed. As you can see, it was from 18 to 50 who can participate. The average age was around 30. And yeah, if you see ITP, it means inside the perimeter. It means they live closer to like Atlanta city limits, and outside the perimeter, it's like more suburbia. And like Luke, for example, he was in both. He went from Atlanta and Toronto back and forth, so that's why he was included. So yeah, the perceptions of bro jobs. So it really just differs depending on the person. When I interviewed them, everyone has their own different experiences. Like my definition may not necessarily be the same as another MSM. And 31 participants out of the 40 were familiar though with the term bro job. TJ, who is a 50-year-old man from suburban Metro Atlanta, he defined it as two guys that swap head and are private about it, but can still be cool when they're in public. According to him, there's a clear difference between a bro job and a hookup, which I found interesting. He said that bro implies friend. So for him, it wasn't like, couldn't be strangers. But I think for the majority of the guys, a bro job could just be pretty much anyone who is probably like mask presenting. Mr. Survey, who's a 45-year-old from rural Alabama, has similar ideas. He thought a bro job partner should be someone you know. So like I said, a lot of this kind of different on the man. So first time bro job encounter. So within the survey portion of the case study, participants were asked about what age, and the average was 18. And that's, I think, typical age of a college freshman, first year university. And that because I think that's a lot of the time where people are experimenting, kind of figuring out what they like, what they don't like. But I think it's very keen to know with a lot of these guys, they were like their 30s and 40s the first time they were having a bro job and same-sex encounters. And also, I do think it's noted that for a lot of guys, they were still like online talking to people maybe prior, like this, I think like this bi-curious stage, right? Before they actually acted on anything. And for some people, they were, engaging in bro jobs when they were single, but now that they had a wife or a girlfriend, they were still going in these online spaces, but not necessarily still, doing it all the time. But yeah, and for some people within the first time, like Kyle gave and received his first bro job with his best friend. Kyle was in his mid-20s when this happened. He was bi-curious prior to the event, having just watched gay and bi porn. And it happened because his friend started opening up about his sex life with his girlfriend and the lack of that. And so he said that they had already a pretty no boundaries friendship, and they brought up jerking off together, and it just sort of happened. His friend just stopped in his college town, and Kyle explained that they sort of just did it, and I received head first since I no longer have that, since he had a dry spell longer. And he explained that his first bro job experience confirmed that he wasn't 100% straight, while his friend still identified as straight after that, which also just shows how sexuality is fluid. And his friend was actually surprised when Kyle came out, because he was like, what? Like, he just thought it was like, I guess, a one-time, I help you, you help me kind of thing. But obviously for Kyle, it was more than that. But not, everyone wants to return the favor. There are a lot of guys who I looked at who just wanted to receive head. For example, Luke, since he actually did have a girlfriend who did not know about this, he didn't want anything other than this NSA hookup. He wants a man who he is, quote, who wants to be face fucked and choked, slapped, and swallows. So often, like if he had a trunk, he would do it there. So really just asserting this dominance. So really just ways to, have these cravings and, okay, I'll get off, basically. So I think for a lot of these men also, like, it may not be like a huge part of their identity. For a lot of them, it was more so a physical act. And yeah, and other people, a lot of times they experimented when they were children, and then, maybe they stopped for a decade, even more. And then also when I say children, I'm sorry, like teens. And then they went back to it later on in life. So I think, like with Mr. Survey, it was one he was exploring with his friend when he was a teenager that he was really interested in this. So, how he kind of described it as this brotherly bond. So again, for some of these people, maybe it was really like a close friend they were, experimenting with. And for other people, got on Grindr, got on Craigslist, rep, and that's really how they, figured out their sexuality. So sexuality as a spectrum. So I think in my survey, you can see the graph there. The vast majority of participants were either straight or bisexual. And I did include a lot of other bi plus identities within the Qualtrics survey. Even like pansexual, only one person. It was pretty much half bisexual, half straight, what they were saying. And so sexual orientation exists on the spectrum. And according to psychologist Rich Savin Williams, 2013 review, it's centered on mostly heterosexual as a distinct sexual orientation. About 3.6 to 4.1% of men are mostly straight. So I also think, this begs into the question that within our society, we often have to pick between gay or straight, and doesn't really leave room for a bi label. Because, as we've seen before, oftentimes when people identify as bi, they are just then being labeled as gay. And I'm also seeing right now in my current research that a lot of the guys who I'm interviewing are basically, not wanting to tell people that they're bisexual because they're just going to be pigeonholed as gay, especially when they're going on dates with women. So some are more open than others. So yeah, there is today a common perception of this, that especially when heterosexuality is the norm. And there were 15 respondents who identified as straight despite their same-sex experiences. Hank was one of them. When asked why he identified as straight and not bisexual or heteroflexible, he said, I don't know. I'm like 95%, but 5% adventurous. And he would later explain that he had only slept with like 3 men, maybe 5. He was primarily attracted to women and just had a few experiences in which he was horny and went on Craigslist. He wanted to be wanted, an object of desire. We're calling a 39-year-old straight man from North Carolina noted that he was romantically attracted to women and only somewhat sexually attracted to male organs, but not the rest of the man. End quote. To him, hooking up
Thank you,
with
Corey. Sorry,
I'm
Corey.
sorry.
I have
Okay,
to stop you right here because, as I
okay.
said, like we have to really tight
Well,
schedule, and I just
yeah,
want to give time for a few questions for others. But I guess what we get the picture is really interesting
yeah.
topic,
I'll
and
just end.
so
Yeah. Here's if
no,
you
it's
want.
great. It's great. No worries.
That's the contact if you
So.
want to reach out to me.
And great for that you're doing a longitudinal study and continuing on doing this research. So, of course, please write us your emails and everything in the chat so people can get in touch, and we can get, hopefully, when you do the next round of research, you can come back to the conference and present them again. Now, we just have 5 minutes before moving on to the next panel on media, but I really want to give to the chat if they have any question about all these topics, which sometimes, if you're not familiar with masculinity studies, could be a bit overwhelming. So I'll just look for chat. Do these men feel any moral dilemma when dating women at the same time in terms of cheating? So I guess this one is for Corey, but I think it could be also for Jason, if you want just a brief very answer. Corey, Jason, if you want to answer to this question. Oh, I guess sorry. Sorry, everyone, we have to move them a bit. Sorry, just the technical difficulties.
Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I moved some speakers.
No worries, no worries. Thank you, Derek. Just to we answered just this question before moving to the next panel. Well,
Okay, sorry.
I guess
Okay.
no worry. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, just to yeah, just to answer your question about, I think for some of the men, they may have felt a moral dilemma, but it seemed like a lot of them there was not that much a moral dilemma. And even those who did like cheat, I would say, it's maybe it happened, a couple times, but not, yeah. But I don't think there was no, for a lot of the people who did it continuously, there was definitely no moral compass about it. So I think it depended on the person, but in this study, the majority did not. Yes, and you can add me. Okay, I think.
Yeah, which is deeply interesting,
I think
actually,
there's
how
something.
they narrate this.
My research considered the ethics of cheating. I think my research here was more so, to answer your question, it was more so focused on the sexual behavior and the act of what, of a bro job. Because also I don't think it didn't seem like any of them were poly or open at the time. But I mean, to be honest, like I said, most of them did not care. What all they wanted to was get was to really get off here. So yeah, I think within relationship ethics, I think the majority of the men also probably were, a lot of them were single. I would say the majority were actually single. So I think it really just differed. And I think because the sample size was small, I only interviewed 8 of the 40. I really don't think I could come to a clear conclusion based on that, based on just 8 people, because I think that, like I said, the majority were single, and the rest of them, who had wives or girlfriends, most did not care, and that one person was not having bro jobs while he was in that relationship.
Thank you, Corey. Amazing work. Please continue to talk about this in the comments. It's been very interesting. And I do recommend, as many have said, Jane's Ward book, Not Gay, Sex Between Heterosexual Straight Men, which is kind of disturbing in some narratives, but it's a really great point to start if you want to know more about masculinities and hetero and bisexualities. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, everyone, for this talk.